My name's Eli English. I own a company called Traditional Speed and Custom in Pittsfield, New Hampshire. And what I specialize in mainly is early Ford hot rods and restorations, mainly up until the 50s. I kind of stay out of the muscle car era stuff, but really like the 30s and 40s in particular, kind of pre-war hot rod stuff, right around, or right after World War II. I like collecting it for myself and I like building for customers. It's my passion. I absolutely love doing it. And as you can see, everything around me is part of it. It isn't just a job to me. I show up I come out here every day, and I love what I do. I started, my grandfather restored Model A's and Model T's, and I remember when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was, or went to go visit my grandparents, all I wanted to do was go for a car ride, And I actually own most of those Model T's that were in my grandfather's collection now, and I have a lot of memories of being 5 or 6 years old, being crammed in between my grandparents in the seat of a Roadster. And then a little bit later on, when I was a teenager, I remember riding in the rumble seat of a Model A. So I guess it stuck with me. I went to art school, figured I was going to become an illustrator. I went through a year of that and decided it really wasn't for me. So I went into the auto body trade, and just kind of the whole time while I was doing it, I'd always had old cars. I started in high school with a 55 Ford pickup and kept that. And then when I graduated, I traded for a 55 Ford car, and then it just snowballed. Until I got a little bit older, I always wanted to get into the open wheel cars. I started out with customs and chop tops and stuff like that, and then kind of evolved into chasing down early original hot rods. To me, it's important to keep the cars in as-found condition if they're still in decent enough shape. If it's something that's absolutely rotted to death and it needs stuff to be safe, then obviously I'd fix it. But the couple of survivor hot rods that I own, I've kind of left them the way that I found them, with a few repairs here and there to make them obviously safe, but for the most part they're in as-found condition, basically because it's a rolling history lesson. A lot of, probably in the 80s and 90s, a lot of the earlier hot rods that were built back before World War II and slightly, or just after, were turned into street rods. And so a lot of that history went away, and all the welds that were done with coat hangers and all that stuff are gone. So I chose to leave my cars as much as I could to show how they were actually built back in the day. So at Larz Anderson, I had my Hinman Roadster, which was built in 1947 by an 11-year-old kid. That one was on display in the back room for about a year. And then I did a motor mouth, and I brought down my 32 Ford and my wife's 28 Ford Roadster, and we put those on display during that motor mouth. As far as the future goes with these, I think that there's always a want for this type of car. Because it's not particularly time-stamped with dated parts, it's a car, these cars can kind of basically still generate interest through the ages, so to speak, because they're mainly comprised of vintage parts from back in the day. So in other words, if the car was, let's use this 32 for example, it was built in 58 as a hot rod, but everything on the car is period correct. And I'm very cautious when I put a car back together that I stay within that time period. For me, it's everything. I love everything vintage. In fact, this summer we're taking a trip in our motorhome to go across Route 66, just because it's a lost era. It was more of an innocent era. I think that and everything was based around art. If you look at the signs, for instance, you look at neon signs, and if you follow stuff on Route 66, you understand that all these were built by artisans. These signs were built by people by hand, and they've had a lot of pride in them. Now today you go and you have a light up vinyl sign, and they're just so bland. There's no excitement anymore. And it was back in the day when they were doing this, they were trying to generate excitement and get you excited to come to their businesses. So they had chasing arrows and flashing neon and chasing neon and all kinds of crazy stuff. And to me, that's all exciting. It's all part of the whole era. So Colonial sign behind me, that came from Laconia, New Hampshire. It was built in 1915. It's 21 feet tall, 3.5 feet wide, and it weighs about 1,700 pounds. I recently got it. It was scrapped at a scrapyard. And the interesting thing is they made an exact replica of it. They just restored the theater. They spent $14 million restoring the theater, and they decided they didn't want the original sign, so they literally sent it to a scrapyard. It's a big piece of Laconia history. There's all kinds of pictures of it in the background of any of the motorcycle bike week footage or anything that happened in Laconia with the dog sleds. And the sign was there until 2020. I love to drive. So as far as cars go, my thing is I really have no interest in car shows. I absolutely love to drive them. That's what they're meant for. So, on weekends we'll take the cars out, sometimes in groups of, even 10 to 15 cars. and we'll drive literally for 10, 12 hours and just hit secondary roads with no particular destination in mind. We just drive. To me, that's what it's all about. I mean, and it goes back to the whole Route 66 thing where, it was the mother road. People began to move across the country, and I kind of apply all that to these cars. That's a dragster's definitely a challenge. It's a 1959 chassis research K88. It's an original chassis car. There's very, very few of them left that are uncut because they built them in 1959 and they were outlawed in 1962 for being too short of a wheelbase. Definitely, it's a scary thing. A little story, the first time I took it on a drag strip, I was doing 40 miles an hour. I pulled the parachute and nothing happened. I thought I was doing 100. It's a whole different, animal. So when COVID hit, my kids were out of school. So back then they were 13 and 17. And so I made a suggestion. I said, they always wanted a hot rod. And I said, tell you what, guys, why don't you guys build a hot rod? I said, I'll tell you, the deal is I'll give you the basics. I bought them a couple of books, but my deal is I cannot touch it. So you guys need to build your own truck. So basically what we did is I did the way that I did my own cars when I was younger, where I sent them out to scrounge around through the farmer fields around here. We came up with a pickup bed. We had a cab that was sitting on an old tractor out back. We needed a frame, put the word out on the internet, and the next thing you know, all the parts started kind of coming together. And they figured out how to build a hot rod based on just asking me questions on the basics on what to do. And they did it. So at 13 years old, my youngest son actually owns that particular truck. He had a running driving hot rod. We went drag racing with it. He learned that he drive it too hard, you blow a motor. He went through like 5 free Model A engines that people have given him. He broke a distributor to drag strip at 13 years old, which was pretty awesome. We were able to find this drag strip up north in Maine that allows kids to run. Then he decided he wanted to do a V8 swap last year, so he put a flathead V8 in it all on his own. He figured it out. He had to make all kinds of his own brackets and adapters, and just basically looking at cars that were in the shop, and they taught themselves how to weld and went on from there. So as far as keeping it alive, I think it's mainly just getting the word out that this stuff exists. I mean, there's kids out there. So when my kids built their truck, next thing you know, there's 6 or 8 high school kids hanging around here, and they helped work on it with my kids, and all those kids have developed appreciation for this. None of them will probably, well, a couple of them might, but most of them are not going to go on and build a hot rod. But at least now they understand what it's all about and why you do it. It was kind of a cool side effect of having them do this here, and and being shut down and having all these other kids with nothing really to do. So these kids literally started coming, and they all learned how to weld. And there's some girls that came over, they learned how to weld. And in fact, some of them think they're going to pursue it as a career down the road when they graduate. So at least I feel that it got some interest that maybe they might not have gotten otherwise by being a part of something like this. But I'm hopeful that down the road that people will see this stuff, whether it be in museums or collections, or see it out driving down the road, that maybe there'll be some interest. I know of some younger kids that are really into it. It's not as many as I would like to see. It's a lot of times when you drive down the road. I remember when I was a kid, if I saw a hot rod going on, I was looking in the windows in the car. And now you drive down the road and kids don't even notice it. They don't even know that it's there. But then there's those few that you break through to and they see it. So basically what I do here at the shop is we work on early Ford hot rods generally. We do everything. We're a start to finish shop. So we can do everything from full fabrication. We do engine work, we do mechanical work, we do electrical work, suspensions, full fabrication. We can actually build a